So thanks for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about some updates on this work that we've been doing since 2018. Some of you have seen this presentation, parts of this presentation, sorry, before, where we talk about stage 1 and 2, some progress we have done in that area so far. But we will also cover, and will be the bulk of our presentation, will be an update on the GoGN workshop that happened in Brisbane last year. And we ran several activities, to really encourage the discussion on EDI in several aspects of open education. We will also talk about some outputs that we have done so far, some things we are planning to do in future, and ask your opinion for future directions. It's informal, so please interrupt me at any time if you want to make a comment, if there is anything pressing you wanted to contribute. So, like I said, we've been doing some work in EDI in open education since late 2018, early 2019, throughout now. The first stage was about investigating EDI in open education in Africa. We interviewed 9 experts there. And then we went there and ran a 2-day. So we went to Nairobi and invited participants that were part of the interviews, and together we discussed the findings. We validated some of that, and they add more information to that. So it was very productive. Stage 2 was we look into Latin America EDI in open education. We couldn't go there because it was during the pandemic, so we had to rethink our approach, but we were able to interview 12 experts. And then we ran, instead of a face-to-face workshop, we had an online one where we did the same. We presented the findings, preliminary findings, validated some of that, and collected, additional information. We also ran several activities to try to implement some of the recommendations that emerged from stage 1 and stage 2. So one of them is the EDI handbook that we developed. One other activity didn't go as planned, but again, it was a huge learning curve on how to work in the area in Global South. But like I said, the bulk of the presentation today will be, about additional information we have been collecting, in particular now during GoGN phase 4, which is started in second half of 2022, if I'm correct, Beck and Rob. We did, since then, we've been collecting information and using the GoGN workshop as a venue for that. One of the venues to collect information. So we did an afternoon workshop at Edmonton, full afternoon with the partial participants, because that one we were running multiple events at the same time. So, but then in Brisbane, we decided to run a full day with everyone in the room to discuss, like I said, different elements of EDI and open education. So we've been very busy trying to get this momentum going, in particularly now with the political landscape involving EDI or DEI around the world. So we try to keep the momentum going. And if you want to have a look at what we have produced so far, this is the link to our website. So there is a tab there for the EDI projects where you will see blog posts, our papers, short papers, conference presentation, and everything we have done so far in that space. Okay, so about our workshop in Brisbane then. So it was in, oh boy, feels like a long time ago, but it's actually 3 months ago only. So we were there, as we got there prior to the OE Global. So we ran a workshop the 2 days before the OE Global in Brisbane. And we had around 20 plus colleagues there, members, experts, and a few other Gojian alumni that were also there for the conference. And we decided to run a panel to start the day. So we invited these 5 colleagues there. Abud from Kenya, but he's a Gojian member and he is in Germany doing his PhD, but he is from Kenya. Melody Chin is from Singapore. She is a colleague, an expert we invited. Joanna Funk is a Gojian alumni from Australia. Corey is an educator, so she has an Aboriginal background, an Indigenous Australian background, and was invited. So we thought it would be very important to have representation of the First Nations of Australia there. And Professor Maria Soledad from Mexico. She's a known colleague from us here as well. So we had this panel which had incredible representation. We collect a huge amount of data during that discussion. And we are going to present here just a summary of some of the findings, because like I said, the whole day was a very provided very rich data, but we can't possibly discuss everything here. We are, though, preparing a summary report of the day, which we will share in a few weeks' time. Okay, so let's explore what did they do. So we had 2 questions to start a discussion. We present these 2 questions to the panel members, and you will see that these questions are about their context. So we really want to understand more what EDI represented in their context. What were the policies, principles, and activities, happening within their context. And what we are going to show here is a summary, and it's contextualized, so summary per region, and then a general discussion points we had. Okay, so in Australia, so Joe and Corey, our panel members, they work in this flexible learning center. So I put this information here because I thought it would be very interesting for you to understand, the gems of the context we found. But again, you have more information on the report. So Corey and, as I was saying, Corey and Joe works in this flexible learning center, which uses a flexible curriculum co-created with young people who don't fit traditional education modules. So it's incredible work that they do. They have a multidisciplinary team, including teachers and social workers, and they offer individualized, supported, grounded in equity, First Nation practices and relational pedagogy. So a lot of the learners in the center have Indigenous background, and they do need this contextualize this First Nation practices, very important for them, so that they feel a sense of belong. So it was very interesting to hear what they were doing there. We also learn a lot what's going on in Singapore, that there are a lot of efforts, EDI efforts, focused on representative practice, like multilingual announcements in public places, for example, just simple things as having a public announcement in multiple languages, because even though it is a city nation, they do have a large amount of languages spoken there. So it is important for them to have that type of diversity. Melody is a librarian and created, she and her team created a special interest group in OER within this Asian Societies Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So her institution is part of this association, and she created a SIG involving the whole association, which is fantastic, but again brings some challenges, but it supports collaboration, best practice, knowledge sharing amongst the institutions. So it was very interesting to see uh, um, Corey's work, sorry, Melody's work in that area. We also learned that in Kenya, they have a framework, an EDI framework that emphasizes social cohesion across its 45 plus ethnic groups and try to address unique educational needs for marginalized communities. They have this policy, it's called the two-thirds gender rule in the government. So it's a constitutional requirement aimed at promoting gender equality in political representation, which is very important, very interesting. So this means that in a particular sector or unit or department in the government, they agenda cannot be more than two-thirds of the total workforce. So, for example, it can't all be male. It could have two-thirds of it male and one-third female. So this is an attempt to include more female in the workforce in the government, and it's still in adaptation process. So the blog that or the document that I read said that, you know, it's a wonderful policy, but it's not fully implemented in all sectors of the government yet. But it's great that it's there. And then we also discuss about, you know, interdisciplinary and global principles for EDI that should be rooted in human rights, openness, and multi-stakeholder engagement. A collaboration should be across disciplines and sectors and focus on leveraging opportunities such as AI, which we will talk more about it, to foster innovation and inclusive solutions. So as you can see, there was a lot of discussions, very rich discussion there. Some other key themes and questions that emerged from the panel were tensions between universal openness and cultural context. And a question that was posed, can openness respect cultural specificity and boundaries while still promoting access to knowledge? So this was in particular to indigenous knowledge and their right to retain some of the content that can't be shared even amongst themselves, because some content, for example, is only for female or only for male within that community. So how do we do that and respect that, but it's still promoting access to knowledge? So that was very, very interesting discussion there. Challenges and the importance of localized knowledge sharing. For example, there was a discussion about language. We found this a very similar problem in phase 2 in Latin America, when we found that, you know, people that are Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers don't have access to, or they don't understand English, they don't have the English expertise or skills, they can't access that, those resources. So how do we promote either translation, knowledge sharing, so then, you know, we promote the principles of openness. and avoid language silos. Developing policies that reflect regional needs, which is basically a summary of all the points there, but the discussion was that it's important to develop those policies that reflect a localized context and regional needs. So I will move into the next activity we have, but we could have a pause here to check if you guys have any questions, would like to add any experience or any views on what we have found so far. Okay. Any other questions? But it was nice to just pause a little because it's a lot of information. And, like I said, we did collect a lot of rich data. And even though he is just a snapshot, is still a lot of interesting and emerging themes to discuss, to present. So this after the panel, we then ran an evidence cafe. So the reason it's a workshop style approach. It's an approach to run a workshop where it allows data collection and as an inclusive and adaptive tool. It's opportunistic and responsive to stakeholders' needs. It allows co-creation because everybody comments and adds to that, including their own experience. So we decided to pilot or an experiment with a different approach to workshop. There were some elements that went really well and perhaps other elements that didn't go as planned, but I think overall it was a really interesting way to run a workshop, and also was interesting to present a different strategy or a different approach to workshops to our members. So what it is then, it's social. It has coffee, which is very important, so keeps us going and the discussion going, as the level of caffeine increases. So it's about listening, it's about community building and social interaction. We received about 12 evidences, so participants were asked to bring their own evidence. And it could be research, stories, and process, but we also had papers, we had PowerPoint presentations, and we had a flyer. So that was really, really interesting to see the different evidence there. It could be at different levels. An evidence could be data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, which we used because we did have indigenous people there participating. It has to be valued by stakeholders, and it has a bunch of tools here that could be used. I'm not going to go into detail because the point of this presentation is not how to run an evidence cafe, but there are several tools you can use to support you running this if you are interested one day. So what did we do? We asked participants to bring their evidence because it has to be relevant to them. We then purposely divided the group into 4 tables. So we got people doing similar research or that brought similar evidence together. Each table had a coordinator. And they discussed one main evidence. There were opportunities to discuss others, but we had the coordinator with their evidence leading that group, and the coordinator also reported back to the group, to the wider group. And we engaged participants in 3 different activities, and one was about getting familiar with the evidence. The other one was to reflect on the types of stakeholders that would engage with that evidence. And the other one was more about their particular individual experience, reflections, and, any link to that evidence. So here are they working. So it was a really engaging time, where they were able to discuss and take notes and create resources, and debate their evidence. Some key points we discussed, and these points are in relation to the diverse range of evidence we had. So we had a South African project on taxation education, and really the point of discussion there was the importance of specialized discipline and contextual demands for OER creation. So that was very interesting to hear what they were discussing there, and then the report. So professional collaboration in resource development. This was a textbook co-creation amongst teachers, faculty, and students, learners. Indigenous knowledge, of course, it came up because we did have a resource there that was about that. So indigenous knowledge and contextualized openness. So respecting indigenous knowledge by adapting Creative Commons license to account for cultural considerations and context-specific openness. So we even talk about if Creative Commons would, come up with a particular license that would incorporate indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge. So library and professional networks, and that was the Asian case, Library SIG supporting OER through local contextually relevant resources for, the whole association there. Healthcare and timeliness in OER. This was a MOOC created with healthcare professionals. And the discussion was around the rapid change of content for healthcare, public healthcare workers, and how having professionals engaged in this co-creation was helpful, because they were always under training and they would always bring that updated content and new legislation or new guidance to the MOOC. In the middle of all this discussion, we also talk about the risks of EDI becoming a superficial tick box exercise, especially within Western context. So then companies and business and education institutions would be just, adding this EDI to tick a box exercise. But since then, this was November, since then, obviously, the context has changed, and a lot of business that were probably doing the tick box exercise now dropped EDI or DEI from their context of framework. So they probably dropped that from their companies and not using anymore. So we just hope that this is not something that will take, that's my hope, that this is not going to take momentum elsewhere. So that's why I think we needed to keep talking about it and researching about it, because it's important. And of course, we talked a lot, and you will see in my next slide that we talked a lot about AI in open education, the risks, the benefits, for creators, for learners, and the risk of repeating the same mistake as having using the content there that is mostly English, mostly created by developed countries. So if generating too much of their content or using existing content to create new content, are we going to continue repeating the problems of the past and leaving the voices still unheard? So we had a lot of discussion about that. And that then brought up a lot of suggestions for future actions. So for example, community-centric open education initiatives. And this was a discussion around, the projects or institutions working open education should include the community, should include not only learners, for example, but parents as well, or a community leader. Integrated approach to open education. This is evidence-based practice. So then it's not only the theory, but also practice and, evidence-based practice. Ethical AI in open education, creating, for example, quality assurance mechanisms. So then, it's contained. Advocating for creators' right and ethical AI standards, which is so then people creating open content doesn't get, continue being acknowledged about it, and doesn't disappear, and don't disappear, within, the creation of new and more and content. Newly generated content. That's what I was trying to say. And training and resources for AI use in research. So then we are all aware of this and can continue doing some research on this topic. So, yeah. There are some outputs here. I'm just looking at the chat to see if there is any discussion points here, but there will be other opportunities for us to discuss anyway. So I'll just go quickly through these resources that we already have from our EDI strand, which is the EDI guidelines. So we will share the slides. You can take this, it's on the website as well. So this is our first guideline where we included phase 1 and phase 2 together. This is an article that Paco and I developed, and has steps on our systematic review in EDI in open education. You will find that there is also an EDI section in the strategy direction from GoGN that was launched last year. Was last year, 2024, based on 2023 workshop. Yes. And we have, like I mentioned, a summary report about the Brisbane workshop last year. We are developing additional publications. There will be a workshop, but not a GoGN workshop. It's just a workshop that we are going to run at a conference in Botswana, PCF 11. And I will open to the floor for your suggestions on what steps we should take next. What would be, for example, from the recommended or suggested actions, what would be an action that we should prioritize in the middle of all this work that is needed, within EDI and open education. So and that was my last slide, and I will